What's going on, bottom line viewers? It's Mitch here with another NFL video. And because the Atlanta Falcons are going to Super Bowl 51, are going to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl for the second time in franchise history, I am here to give you the top 10 Atlanta Falcons in NFL history. Now, all of these statistics are taken from their time only as a Falcon. So if they played anywhere else, I didn't account their statistics for their time anywhere else on a different team. This is only with the Atlanta Falcons. So these are players that are the greatest players ever to play for the Atlanta franchise. The criteria was how good is the player, how good were they, what were their achievements, and then also how important were they to the franchise. That is very key as well. Start the top 10 off with Steve Bartkowski. Steve Bartkowski was the first big-time Atlanta quarterback. He threw for 156 touchdowns, had 24,000 passing yards, and a 75.4 career passer rating. He went to the Pro Bowl 2 times in 1980 and 81. He led the NFL in passing touchdowns in 1980 with 31 touchdowns, which is pretty impressive for the 80s. Bartkowski is one of the 10 quarterbacks in NFL history who has achieved consecutive 30 passing touchdown seasons in 1980 and 81 at least one time in their career. Only 10 quarterbacks have done that, and Steve is one of them. Bartkowski was selected, of course, in the Pro Bowl twice, and he was an All-NFC player in 1980. Bartkowski led the NFL in passing in 1983 in passing yards with a 97.6 passer rating. So Bartkowski accomplished a lot in terms of a passer. He was the first big-time quarterback in Atlanta franchise history. He wasn't the most successful in terms of bringing his teams very far in the playoffs or anything like that. He actually didn't have the greatest record as a team, but he was a great player, had a great passer rating for the 80s with 97.6 in 1983, led the NFL in passing touchdowns and yards, so that's pretty impressive for Steve Bartkowski, and he comes in at number 10 for the Atlanta Falcons' best players in franchise history. At number 9, I have a player that's currently on the Atlanta Falcons, Julio Jones. Julio Jones has 512 receptions on the career, 7,857 receiving yards, and 43 touchdowns. Now, Julio would be a lot higher, but he's only played a few years, so I can't really account just talent into the mix. You have to account resume, and Julio's resume, because he hasn't played that long, is only that of a 4-time Pro Bowler, 2-time first-team All-Pro, and leading the NFL in receiving yards, receptions in a season. So, Julio Jones has so far a really good career, and he'll probably end up going down as one of the greatest receivers in NFL history. But for now, he just doesn't surpass the other players on this list in terms of a resume, in terms of a full, complete career, and in terms of an Atlanta Falcon. He does have a big impact for Atlanta in terms of he's been a part of one of the most successful Atlanta teams in history, but also he needs to beef up that resume to not only become one of the best Atlanta Falcons of all time, but to become one of the best receivers of all time, which he has every skill to do. Let's move on to number 8, where I have Jeff Van Note. Jeff Van Note was a center who established himself as one of the best in the NFL, making 5 Pro Bowls and helping a young Atlanta franchise to some of the greatest seasons in team history. His 18-year tenure with the Falcons is one of the 25 longest in NFL history and is the second longest while staying with the same team. He played in 246 games over his ridiculously long career of 18 seasons, and his 225 games started as a Falcon is second most in team history. Van Note only missed 4 games in his entire NFL career while racking up 5 Pro Bowls and 2 second-team All-Pro selections in the 70s and the 80s. So Van Note is definitely the best center in Atlanta franchise history. A lot of people also think that he should be in the Hall of Fame. That maybe one day he will be. Right now he's a broadcaster for Atlanta as well. So Van Note is one of the legends there in Atlanta and definitely one of the best Falcons of all time. Let's go to number 7. Number 7 is the Michael Vick. Of course, I have to put him at number 7 because he wore number 7. For me, Michael Vick, with bias aside, he is my favorite Atlanta Falcon of all time. He is probably the most popular Atlanta Falcon of all time, and that had a lot to do with where he was put on the list. But the thing is that Michael Vick only played 5 to 6 seasons with the Atlanta Falcons, so you can't really put him too high on the list, as well as the fact that he had a lot of success with Philadelphia as well in the course of his career. So Michael Vick, for me, is my favorite Atlanta Falcon of all time, but he's also one of the greatest Atlanta Falcons of all time if you look closely at what he did over the course of his career. He had a winning record as a starter, 38-28. He had a playoff record of 2-2. He made the playoffs twice, and he brought his team at least to the divisional round each time. And then he had pretty good passing and rushing totals. Of course, Michael Vick is known as a great runner, but also passing totals. He's 5th in franchise history. He's 4th in touchdowns, and he's pretty good in terms of a passing touchdown to interception ratio. He had a 75.7 passer rating, which is very close to Steve Bartkowski's, but slightly above. And rushing yards in general, he is 6th amongst other runners in Atlanta franchise history. That includes running backs. He had 3,859 yards and 21 touchdowns, which ranks 9th in franchise history. He's 1st in yards per carry, actually in NFL history, but has a 7.3 yards per carry in Atlanta history. A 3-time Pro Bowler in his career from 2001 to 2006. He was the first African-American quarterback taken 1st overall in the NFL draft. That is pretty crazy. That's a history-making moment for not only the NFL, but the Atlanta franchise. Vick became the first quarterback ever to rush for over 1,000 yards in a single season, and he also set the record for yards per carry with 8.4 in a season. He turned Atlanta into more of a relevant franchise after many losing seasons and had the highest selling jersey in the NFL at one point. He's also one of the most loved players of all time and the best running quarterback in NFL history. He has the most rushing yards of all time for a quarterback, and it's kind of sad to see what happened to his career in the middle of it, but he redeemed himself, came back, and he didn't get to play for Atlanta again, but he played for the Philadelphia Eagles and had a great career overall. Michael Vick is number 7 on the top 10 Atlanta Falcons of all time. At number 6, I have Jessie Tuggle. Jessie Tuggle was a beast of a linebacker for Atlanta in the 1990s, one of the best linebackers in the 1990s. He had 1,809 tackles over the course of his career. He had 21 sacks and 6 interceptions. He also recovered 10 fumbles, returning them for 155 yards and an NFL record 5 touchdowns. He was a 5-time Pro Bowler in 92, 94, 95, 97, and 98. He was a 3-time All-Pro in 91, 94, and 98, and an NFC champion, helping the Atlanta Falcons get to the Super Bowl against John Elway's Broncos in 1998. Tuggle also holds the record for the most tackles in the 90s with 1,293. So you can say that this guy was pretty much a tackling machine, one of the better middle linebackers in the history of Atlanta football, and one of the more loved players, especially defensive players, in Atlanta history. So Jessie Tuggle comes in at number 6. At number 5, I have the best tackle in Atlanta history. That is Mike Kenn. Kenn played his entire 17-year NFL career with the Falcons from 78 to 94. He is notable for having started all 251 NFL games in which he played. He holds the Falcons franchise record for games started. He was a 5-time Pro Bowler from 1980 to 1984. He was a first-team All-Pro from 80, 83, and 91, and a second-team All-Pro in 81 and 82. Bill Walsh said of Mike Kenn that he's never seen an offensive tackle with his agility or quickness. He was named a semifinalist for the 2015 Pro Football Hall of Fame, so Kenn might one day get into the Hall of Fame. He's very close. He's on the precipice of getting into the Hall of Fame. So Mike Kenn is the best tackle in Falcons history and arguably a Hall of Famer. So you have to put him in the top 5 for Atlanta Falcons players. At number 4, we come in with the Atlanta quarterback, currently Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan is most likely going to be the MVP in the 2016 season, so I think a lot of people were kind of wondering where he would rank in on this list. But for me, he ranks in at number 4. He has a positive record with 85 wins and 57 losses. He's thrown for 37,000 yards and 240 touchdowns. He has a career passer rating of 93.6. He's a 4-time Pro Bowler, which kind of shocked me a little bit. I didn't really think he went to that many Pro Bowls. He was the Offensive Rookie of the Year in 2008 and led the Atlanta franchise to their most success really ever. He's had the most successful regular seasons with 13-3 records twice, and now this season he's brought them to a Super Bowl. He holds every record basically for the quarterback position. Bartkowski also holds some of the records, but Matt Ryan has surpassed him in passing yards at the very least. Matt Ryan is going to be an MVP, which was a huge factor in putting him at number 4 on this list. If he continues to play at the pace that he did this season, you could see him rising on the charts as his career moves along, very much like Julio Jones. But Matt Ryan currently comes in at number 4. A Super Bowl would do him wonders if he were to win next Sunday. So Matt Ryan comes in at number 4 as one of the greatest Atlanta Falcons of all time. At number 3, I have Tommy Nobis. Tommy Nobis, you guys might not know this, but he became the first player ever drafted by the Atlanta Falcons, and he's arguably the best player to ever play for the team. He amassed 294 combined tackles, which stands today as the team's all-time single-season record, and is unofficially actually the most tackles ever credited to one player in one season in the history of the NFL. So he was a tackling machine. I know I said that Jessie Tuggle was a tackling machine, but Nobis was right on the same level, if not better. 294 tackles in one season, that's insane. In 11 professional seasons, he led the Falcons in tackles 9 times. He was an all-decade player in the 1960s. He was a Defensive Rookie of the Year in 1966, a 5-time Pro Bowler, 2-time All-Pro. He's also a legend in Texas football. Nobis is one of the greatest players ever to play for Atlanta, arguably the best. And it's sad to see that I never got to see him play, or I don't think there's any footage of him playing, but from every account, he is one of the greatest of all time for the Atlanta Falcons. So Atlanta and Tommy Nobis comes in at number 3. At number 2, Claude Humphrey. Claude Humphrey was the best sacker in the history of the Atlanta Falcons. He is also a Pro Football Hall of Famer, a 6-time Pro Bowler from 1970 to 74, and again in 77, a 5-time first-team All-Pro and 3-time second-team All-Pro. He's the NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year in 1968. Of course, a Pro Football Hall of Famer, but not only is he a Hall of Famer, but he's revolutionary to other Hall of Famers in pass rushing, like Reggie White, Bruce Smith, and also his fellow 2014 NFL Hall of Famer, Michael Strahan. So Humphrey had a real impact on a lot of different defensive ends and pass rushers over the course of the NFL and NFL history. So that's a huge factor in putting him at number 2. But not only that, but he's the best defensive player ever to play for Atlanta for an extended period of time. So Claude Humphrey played for other franchises, but he played most of his career in Atlanta, which was a big factor. He's a Pro Football Hall of Famer, their best defensive lineman, and he was one of the first guys to really put Atlanta on the map. So in the 70s, he was a huge deal. All right, so we head to number 1, which is Deion Sanders. Did we really expect anybody else? Deion only played like 4 to 5 seasons for the Atlanta Falcons, but they were really good seasons, and also you have to factor in that he was the guy to put Atlanta on the map. As much as I said that Michael Vick was the guy to put Atlanta on the map, sure, they did in different ways. I think Michael Vick was kind of the guy that put them back on the map, but at the very beginning, from 1989 to 1993, Deion Sanders kind of took the NFL by storm, and everybody started paying attention to Atlanta as one of the more popular teams in the league because of Deion's play and because of his popularity. Deion had 24 interceptions in his Atlanta career, 3 touchdowns returned. Those aren't including kick return or punt returns. He actually had 10 touchdowns in his career for the Atlanta Falcons. He pretty much created the shutdown cornerback. He was an electrifying returner, as I said. And in 1992, he also led the league in kickoff return yards and yards per punt return and return touchdowns. He was a great returner. He was a great cornerback. He was the greatest cornerback, in my opinion, ever to play. And he represented Atlanta culture like no one else before him. And he also, again, put Atlanta on the map. That cannot be stated enough. He had his career high 7 interceptions in 1993 with the Atlanta Falcons. A lot of people actually think it was the season after where he won the Defensive Player of the Year with San Francisco. But he was actually arguably the best when he was an Atlanta Falcon. So there's that. But over his 5 years with the Falcons, Sanders always found a way to get in the end zone. Like I said, 10 times in the end zone. That's 3 defensive touchdowns, 3 kick return touchdowns, 2 punt return touchdowns, and 2 receiving touchdowns. He also played receiver. A lot of people don't remember that. Deion Sanders is the greatest Atlanta Falcon of all time, in my opinion, without a doubt. I don't care if he only played 4 seasons. He's the best player ever to come from Atlanta, and he's the best player to ever play for the Falcons. So Deion Sanders is number 1, followed by Claude Humphrey, Tommy Nobis, Matt Ryan, Mike Kenn, Jessie Tuggle, Mike Vick, Jeff Van Oat, Julio Jones, and Steve Bartkowski. So those are the 10 best Atlanta Falcons in NFL history. If you guys want to check out who the honorable mentions are, maybe you are confused why somebody is not on the list, check the description. I'll also put them in the comment section. So there will be the honorable mentions, which there was a long list. This was actually a very difficult list to make because Atlanta doesn't have really a lot of clear-cut, great players that are very recognized around the league, like let's say the Steelers or the Cowboys or a team like that. So Atlanta was a more difficult team to measure their success with their impact on the franchise. So anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit that like button and subscribe to the Bottom Line View for more top 10s in the NFL like this one and more NFL discussion videos. A lot of videos heading up to the Super Bowl, so be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell as well so you guys can be up to date with the latest on the channel. Thanks, guys, for watching. Peace out.